welcome from the deep. I am Mike the Finder.
And I am Book of Brett.
And today we are going to be talking about the 1986 film Top Gun. Not the 2022 film Top Gun. I think that's what it's called. The new one's called Top Gun, right?
Top Gun something, yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking about the old one. And the reason we're talking about that is because neither one of us has ever actually seen this movie.
Nope, and everyone I know has seen it.
Yeah, it does feel like one of those movies that the whole planet has seen. So, like, I do think it was maybe time for us to watch this. And It's weird, man, because this is one of those movies I have stayed away from pretty much my whole life on purpose. Because I have felt like maybe I'm not the target demographic for this movie. And so I've just kind of felt like there's no need for me to watch it before this to do a review on it.
It's definitely one of those movies where like you see it and you're like, okay, that could be a fun action movie. And then the thing that always kept me from it was even like the things I'd seen from it felt too 80s. And now I know that I wasn't wrong. This is got to be one of the most 80s movies. As far as action movies goes, I have not seen a more 80s action movie than Top Gun.
I gotta say, as I was watching this last night, you know me, I'm super into 80s horror, and the 80s, the 80s hold a really special place in my heart, especially horror. Action movies are one of the things that I tend to prefer the 90s stuff because that's the 100%. Stuff I grew up watching, right?
Yeah.
And the 80s action stuff, I have a giant, like, blind spot for 80s action. So
yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing is like the 80s action movies I've seen are like Aliens and Predator,
right,
and Die Hard, and
well, and those
stuff
also
like that.
have a tinge of sci-fi and horror to them anyway, right? So
they do, but that's the thing is like those movies, while taking themselves very seriously, do it very well. Top Gun takes itself very seriously and still feels like a fucking joke the whole time. The whole time it feels like a joke.
I think a lot of that is context for nowadays, though.
That's fair.
So
but
before we get into all this, before we get into any of this, go ahead and give us, as we usually do, a synopsis, and then we'll go through the IMDb stuff, and then we'll get to it.
Tom Cruise bros out on a ship and we all feel bad for him. That's the synopsis.
You know, I was curious how you're going to feel about this, and I think now I know. So as we...
it's more complex than that, but yeah, so basically, Tom Cruise is a fighter pilot for the U.S. Navy, and he gets recruited into the Top Gun program and he basically has this rivalry with Val Kilmer, and it's basically him and this team of fighter pilots trying to not only graduate from the Top Gun program, but to become the Top Gun of the Top Gun program.
So, as we always do, we'll jump over to IMDb here real quick. This is from 1986. It is an hour 50. It has a 6.9 out of 10 on IMDb, which is lower than I expected it to be, that's for sure. Go ahead.
I was going to say, given how much you hear about Top Gun and how many endearing things I've heard about Top Gun, it's surprising that it would be 6.9.
Yeah. The one-sentence synopsis here is, as students of the United States Navy Elite Fighters Weapons School compete to be the best in class, one daring young pilot learns a few things from a civilian instructor that are not taught in the classroom. I hate that so much. I hate it.
You can't learn about life in a classroom, Mike. You can't learn. If Dangerous Minds has taught us anything, it's that you can't learn life in a classroom.
This is directed by Tony Scott, written by Jim Cash, Jack Epps Jr., Uwe Yone? I don't know.
Can we talk about for a second about how Tony Scott got this job based off of a car commercial that he directed for Audi?
Well, you know what's also really interesting is Tony Scott also directed the Danger Zone music video. So I just thought that was a funny little thing to throw in there.
You mean one of the 3 songs that plays throughout the entirety of this movie?
It is so funny you say that, because I have written down here somewhere, why do they use the same 3 songs over and over again?
There are 3 songs in this soundtrack.
This stars Tom Cruise, Tim Robbins, Kelly McGillis, who am I forgetting?
Tom Skerritt.
Okay, and then there's one more. Who am I?
Meg Ryan. Meg Ryan
Val
as
Kilmer.
the most
Meg Ryan, Val Kilmer. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get into this. Why don't you give me your overall thoughts on Top Gun from 1986?
So I really, really tried to watch Top Gun in the context of the 80s, and I really tried to watch it in the mindset of the demographic that this movie was aimed at. And I did that pretty well right up until the volleyball scene. When we get to the, and I won't get into it too much, I won't skip ahead too much, but the volleyball scene is where I broke. And I remember Brittany even sitting next to me, like, making fun of it, and I told her, I was like, I have to watch this in a serious mentality. I have to watch this for a movie review. I have to watch this from a fair, unbiased standpoint. And I did that. I did that until the volleyball scene. I got past, I tried to see past the 2-hour pissing contest that this movie is, because the entire movie is just one big pissing contest between all of the people involved in this movie. It's the most, this has got to be one of the most bro movies I've ever seen.
It's definitely, I have Toxic AF written down here.
Yeah.
And circled a whole bunch, because this is, I completely agree. This is like a bunch of Chad frat boys wrote an action movie. That's how this feels, because it's like, it's just so broy and like filled with masculinity and like just like it's just gross. Yeah,
it hurt. It did. It does have some redeeming qualities. I will give it some redeeming qualities. Tom Cruise's performance is really good. Tom Cruise's performances are always really good. It's what makes me so sad that he's a human-shaped pile of feces as a human being. But I love Tom Cruise's acting. I hate him as a human being, though. I really do.
I agree.
100%. I even made a note, though, and this might be because I was getting drunk while I was watching this, but I actually made a note that said I can see why Tom Cruise was such a sex icon, because there's some parts in this movie where I'm going, oh, Tom.
This is really mean. Is it the part where some of the parts where he's not smiling?
It's more to do with the cinematography and how there's
because he has snaggletooth and he has a unibrow in this. So
I'm so glad you brought that up. There is a close up in this movie where I went, Tom Cruise has a unibrow.
Yeah.
I didn't know Tom Cruise had a unibrow.
That thing that everybody makes fun of, where you draw a line right down Tom Cruise's face and his tooth is right in the middle of his face, is so noticeable in this movie. Anyway, continue.
But yeah, so overall, it was a very, like you said, it's full of toxic masculinity. It's super nationalistic, and I expect that out of a military movie, but this was also made at a time where the whole anti-Reds, anti-communist mentality was like at its peak. And as far as like, in the latter half of the 1900s, not including like, the 1950s.
1900s, that hurts my soul a little bit.
Doesn't it? Oh yeah, buddy, we're 22 years into the 2000s. Yeah. 2000s? 20,000s? 2000s.
2000s. Yeah.
But yeah, so like that was a big problem for me, is just because it glorifies the toxic masculinity that I think was probably pretty prevalent in the military, even to this day, really. And it's, like I said, it's hyper nationalistic, hyper pro-military, but it's a military movie, so I can kind of, skirt past that a little. I'm not going to not notice it, but I can skirt past it a little bit. The aerial cinematography is awesome. I'm going to give it that. The cinematography in the air, the usage of actual fighter jets, seeing the skill of actual fighter pilots, which they actually did. Obviously, they used actual fighter pilots. And it's really funny because if you look in the credits where they actually mention the squadron, they all actually do have these ridiculous ass nicknames, just like they do give them in the movie. That's not a thing they did for the movie. That's just like I mean, they're call signs. I get that, but and I'm gonna get a little scatterbrain here because I have to mention this. As we're talking about like the toxic masculinity and everything, something else that was really toxic that I noticed in this movie is the one black guy that is a fighter pilot. Did you notice what his call sign was?
I did. I wasn't gonna bring that up, but
we're gonna bring that up.
I did notice that. And
Sundown.
His
name is Sundown.
Okay, so I don't know if everybody else has the context of like where you and I grew up, which I think makes that maybe worse if you didn't grow up in a southern area.
Yeah.
You may not know the context to that, of which I am not gonna get into.
No, don't get into that.
But you and I both have that context, therefore that call sign is really, really f***ed up.
So like I said, there's a lot not okay with this movie.
Yeah.
There's a lot that is not okay with this movie, but I feel like you could, again, this is why I tried to watch it in the context of when it was made. I mean, you could say the same thing about Peter Pan. I mean, you could say you could say that about a lot of different things, but no, like I said, the aerial cinematography was really good. The pacing up until the third act was decent. It does feel like they get just kind of shoved into a battle segment just because we need a real battle segment at the end. That does feel like we kind of rush into that a little bit. Meg Ryan is incredibly annoying in this movie.
You could have stopped after the word annoying.
Okay. Meg Ryan's incredibly annoying. Meg Ryan is incredibly annoying. I mean, now she's a monster. I don't know if you've seen her recently. She's a monster now. But she's very, her character is so annoying. She does a terrible Southern accent that's sometimes there and sometimes not. Like, it kind of comes and goes whenever I guess she can manage it. But I will say, overall, it's just not a... I don't get the appeal of it, but I'm not the demographic for it.
Right.
And I knew Danger Zone was going to be in this movie. I didn't know it was going to be in this movie as much as it was.
The whole movie, yeah.
And then Take My Breath Away plays. I don't know how many times that plays.
I think it's 4. I think they play it 4 times.
Honestly, at this point, I'm surprised Eye of the Tiger didn't make an appearance in this movie because I feel like this is the perfect movie for Eye of the Tiger to be in.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, it's. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it's it's just very it's here. It's here. It's not meant to be. This has the same. This feels like it serves the same purpose as a Marvel movie.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I definitely agree with that. One of the things that I have circled is this movie is made for stupid people. This film.
We're gonna get so much shit.
I don't care.
Don't edit that out, but yes.
This movie is shallow as a puddle. It's got this forced depth. We are going to be getting into spoilers here, so heads up on that. I don't know if we can spoil a movie from 1986, but heads up on that. One of the biggest issues I have, I agree with pretty much everything you said. The aerial cinematography is fantastic, but the problem with it is that they're trying way too hard to make the Navy look cool. So much so that it comes off as propaganda, and it feels super forced. Like everything, the part where he's driving that motorcycle, following the plane, just felt like a joke. Like it's And again, this is watching this with the context of things like Archer and Family Guy, who have all made fun of this thing, right? That's definitely part of it, but it feels like one massive joke to me, and it was hard to take seriously. One of the things it is emotionally bankrupt to a point that it bothered me a lot. Like, for instance, the only reason Goose dies is to give Maverick an obstacle to overcome, and it is so fucking see-through that it's like it hurt my soul a little bit.
Right.
The entire movie is basically B-roll of planes, and with little itty bitty parts of story dripped in, just enough so that it's not just 2 hours of planes flying around. And that's the biggest issue I had with it, right? It's not to mention the goddamn cinematography almost made me motion sick. It moves, it's shaky, it's constantly all over the goddamn place, and it's to give it this feeling of action and fast movement and stuff. But what it ended up doing is almost making me motion sick. Like, to be fair, I put this on when I had already had a few beers. And I knew I went into this like putting this movie off until the very last second to watch it, because I knew that I wasn't going to like this. And I tried to go into it with an open mind, but I couldn't. 8 minutes in, I was not only bored, but I have written down here, you, Brett, because you made me fucking watch this movie, and I hated it. I could not wait for it to be over. The action is mediocre. The acting is okay, but there's no plot. There's no story. The only plot that's in here is that Goose fucking dies, and it makes Maverick sad. Like,
I will say, I think there's, in my opinion, I think there's more story here than you're giving it credit for.
Absolutely not. No, there's not.
Enough.
No, the story is these guys made it to Top Gun. And then Goose dies.
Well, yeah, but Tom Cruise,
and then at the end, they shoehorn in this battle scene for no reason. And it's just there to give it this final Act 3 climax that doesn't pay off.
How else would him and Val Kilmer become friends?
See, and I also have written down here, thank God Val Kilmer is in this, otherwise I would have checked out immediately. Because he is the redeeming factor in this for me, even though he has such a tiny role. Iceman, as his commanding officer calls him. Iceman. He was pretty cool. I will admit that. But he didn't have a big enough role in this, and I knew from the very get-go, these guys have a beef at the beginning, but I bet toward the end they're gonna get together and be best friends, and everything's gonna be okay, and they're gonna save each other's lives at the end.
It's set up from the very beginning. From the very beginning, they have this rivalry for no other reason than, again, a pissing contest. Yeah. There's no other reason for them to have this rivalry. Their entire rivalry is set off by eye contact in their intro class. Yeah, that's it.
Well, the other big thing that hit me right at the beginning too was that Cougar, the guy from the very beginning that freaks out, he's best in class, but he couldn't handle a flyby. He freaks out at a flyby, and like totally off the radar. I don't understand why it wouldn't have just been okay to make Maverick and Goose top of the class at the beginning. Is it only to add a little bit of drama there at the beginning to just drip feed you a little bit of plot? Or
it could be that. It could be that. It could also be the fact showing development for Tom Cruise, for Maverick, I think, or Pete, I guess is his name, which
Oh, he calls himself Mav, so I will only be referring to him as Mav from here on out.
Mav?
The thing that
Mav,
drove me crazy is even people that aren't in the military in this movie call everyone by their call signs, which is cringe. This whole movie...
Is that a thing, though? Maybe that's a thing.
I don't know, but this whole movie is cringe. The whole thing. From the music, to the aviators, to the volleyball scene, to the... Every single thing about this I found cringy, and I hated it. I hated it.
I won't lie. It's not that I didn't want to like this. It's that I wanted to give myself the chance to like it. Because, again, I knew I was watching a quintessential 80s action film. I knew that. I knew that going into it, and so I was like, okay, this is going to be full of a bunch of, like, really cringy stuff, but try to look past it, try to give it a chance, and I did that. I gave it a fair chance. I wouldn't say I hated it the whole time, but the whole time I was convincing myself it was made in the 80s. It was made in the 80s.
Cliffhanger was too, and I dig Cliffhanger. So, you know, there is a way for something to be super 80s, but not cringy. And again, it's probably because you and I have always been sort of, we've always sort of found bros and chads kind of cringe anyway, right?
Yeah.
And so that plays a major factor in this. And then you put Danger Zone on top of it 40 times. And it's just this, it just feels like a joke. And I couldn't watch it through the eyes of the 80s. I couldn't. Yeah. I just couldn't. Most of the time I can do that. But with this, I just couldn't. I don't know why. Part of it is the shallow action and the shoehorned in story about his dad, only to sort of try to give his character some sort of emotional depth of why he's doing what he's doing and why he wants to be the best and all of this stuff. But I just found it all too shallow. And when the
it's shallow.
When the plot is that shallow, the action doesn't mean anything. When Goose dies, I don't care. They try to get me to care with that scene in the bar because like they show them all having fun and they show his kid and his wife and all of this stuff. They try to almost force a connection between you and Goose right before he dies. In that scene at the bar, I knew he was going to die. Because it just felt like it. It just felt like they were trying too hard to make me care about him, and the whole thing is just see-through. It's just see-through.
Speaking of Goose's death, I think it's really, 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 really f***ed up that his decision with the dog tags is to throw them into the sea.
Yes.
Rather than I don't know, maybe give them to his wife
or his son. Yeah.
Or his son.
Yeah, for sure.
Or any of the people that probably miss him a little bit more than you might. Like maybe give. And the other thing I have a note on because I tried not to make like specific notes. The bar scene in this, while the bar scene was playing out, I made a note that said this. Let me just pull this note up real fast. This bar seems like a very unsafe environment for women. Like, this whole thing, it's just, this bar is just seeping at the walls, Amityville horror style, with just men that just feel like they have just, like, cum dripping out of every orifice, just overcome with I have to go get laid. I have to go get laid. Like, it's just, this whole bar scene, the whole time I'm sitting here going, like, all these women should get out. They should get out, and they should get out now to the safety of their vehicles and their homes.
It's just cringe. And I will say, the high-stakes stuff in the planes is very cool, but all that stuff only matters if you care about the characters and the story that's being told. And because there is very little to no plot, I don't care about any of them. So the high stakes in all of it didn't matter at all to me. Like, I just didn't give a about it. And so for me, it just felt like very emotionally manipulative when they did try to get me to feel for these people. For instance, Mav's backstory, Goose's family, all of this stuff, this heart-to-heart he has with his commanding officer about his dad, that only exists to give him some sort of reason to do what he's doing, and it just felt like somebody right out of film school wrote this. That's how it feels. Like the most basic principles of how you write a script are in this, and it's just see-through and too basic.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never heard anybody talk about Top Gun in a groundbreaking sort of way.
Maybe that's part of it. Is I'm trying to watch this as like a movie to review, and like the cinematography and the plot and the script and all of these things, and maybe if I did the same thing for Total Recall or something, I'd feel the same way. You know what I'm saying? But like, I still feel like I don't understand why this movie had the cultural impact that it did, because it feels niche as
I think so. So on that note, I think the reason this movie had the cultural impact that it did was, I think a big part of that had to do with the time that it came out. I mean, we're talking like Reagan era that this movie came out.
Yeah.
So I think that has a big part to do with it. I also think that the aerial cinematography was pretty groundbreaking at the time.
For sure. And that stuff is truly amazing. It's truly amazing.
One cool little fact, actually, is this whole movie was based on an article that was written about the life of a fighter pilot in this town in California. That article featured photography by a U.S. Navy fighter pilot photographer. And he was actually one of the aerial camera operators in this movie.
Oh, that's cool.
So I thought that was actually pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
But I think the whole point, I will say this, regardless of how we feel about this movie, and I think it's pretty obvious that though neither one of us were crazy about it, we both feel differently about this movie. Regardless of that, I think the reason that it was so successful is because it does what it set out to do. I think everything that is in this movie is exactly what they wanted it to do. They didn't want it to be about some big story. It wasn't supposed to be about, depth. It wasn't supposed to be about anything cinematic or making it a good film, which is a problem. I want to make that clear.
Yeah. That's
a problem. However, I think the things it set out to do, it did those things, and it's a Marvel movie in the 80s. It's there in front of you to grab your attention for like quick spurts, throw in a little bit of story, throw in a little bit of detail to, fill in the patches until we get to the next action scene. It jumps from action scene to action scene to action scene, and I think that's all they wanted it to do, which is why it's not good.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. I think that if we spent more time knowing who Maverick is as a person, if we spent more time developing Maverick and Goose's relationship, I might care more that Goose dies. But you're right. I mean, it's just all of the Top Gun school thing is just a vehicle to get us from one plane scene to another. And I think because of that, not only does it feel slow and drags, it's way too long. The color palette, the color palette. Oh my God, it is so boring and tan and orange. It's awful. I hate how this movie looks. Everyone is sweaty, and it doesn't.
Everyone is sweaty.
Everyone is sweaty.
Everyone is so sweaty throughout this whole movie, and it's like, okay, I get it if you're on like a ship or a submarine. Like,
right.
I don't know from personal experience, but I'm gonna assume air conditioning probably isn't their main priority on a U.S. Navy ship. I get that, but in a school, come on,
exactly.
And I was born and raised in California. There's AC in buildings, and there's not that much humidity. Everyone is so sweaty.
Yeah.
You know what? Maybe we're wrong, Mike. Maybe we're wrong. Maybe it's not sweat. Maybe everybody was spritzing themselves a lot to keep themselves cool, and we're just seeing the in-between of the spritzes.
The only part it would make sense, other than the plane scenes, for everybody to be that sweaty, is the sex scene. And oh my God, when she follows him and pulls over, they pull over, and she goes, but I can't say that because then I think they'll see right through that I'm falling for you. It's like, you have had 5 conversations with this guy, maybe. You've spent 3 hours together outside of that school, maybe. And you're in love with him? That doesn't make any sense.
I think what underscores your point even further is that she wasn't into him until she found out who he was.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want anything to do with, oh, you're him?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, I mean, that is genuinely how I feel about it. Don't hate on me too much here. I told you at the beginning, 80s action is not my thing. Action in general has never been a huge thing for me. And so,
Right.
So this movie, Brett picked it knowing damn well how I was going to feel about this movie. Let's not even get it twisted.
No, I did this on purpose.
Right.
This is 100% on purpose.
Right. So I feel like this feels a lot like the Star Wars episode, which if you haven't seen, we'll link up top right here right now, where it just feels kind of like a setup for you to just be like, you hated this? What? Like,
If you ever compare Star Wars to Top Gun again, I'll actually kill you.
they're the same movie.
Nope, yep. Delta flies to Florida, right? Just make a plane ticket here.
I'm kidding. By comparison, Star Wars is a masterpiece compared to Top Gun.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, though. Do you want to watch 2.5 hours of Top Gun?
See, the
Do you think there's a director's cut?
The problem with Star Wars is that it's all political intrigue bullshit, which is boring as shit to me as well. So I don't care about any of that stuff either.
Fair
so
enough.
It's like that, whatever.
Like I said, I think I did not hate Top Gun as much as you did.
I could not wait for it to be over. I couldn't wait for it to be over.
I will say that, but again, I went into this knowing full well that I knew what I was getting into with this. I knew what I was getting into with this because it was in the 80s. I looked it up. It's smack dab in the middle of the 80s.
Yeah, it's 86.
So,
yeah.
And with the cast that we've got, I mean, this is
the guy from ER's good. That guy's good.
The guy from ER, which one?
That is the guy from ER, right? Now that I say that out loud, it's the Goose.
Oh, he is in ER. You're right. He was in ER. Yeah. But
wait,
like
is Tim Robbins in this? Why is he on the Top Gun billing?
Tim Robbins was in the beginning, I think. I'm pretty sure he was in the very beginning.
Oh, okay. But anyway, that is the guy from ER, right? I'm not crazy.
Yeah,
That's like the main guy from ER.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like I said, I knew what I was getting into with Top Gun, and so like when something terrible happened, instead of getting angry, like I'm sure you did, it kind of more or less just made me roll my eyes. Like, yeah, that's what I thought I would get out of Top Gun.
I didn't get angry. I felt exasperated. Maybe the right word for it. I just felt like,
Did you feel used a little bit?
Like, dude, I don't know. I just felt like, again, I'm not the target demo for this movie. I knew going into this I wasn't going to like it. Therefore, I really did try to keep an open mind, but by the first 10 minutes, dude, I knew that this is just not, I don't know. Michael Ironside's good in it. Like,
I like Michael Ironsides.
I do too, but like, this is like stereotypical 80s action and I'm not into it, so.
Well, it's not that it's, again, it's, the issue isn't even that it's stereotypical 80s action shit. It's propaganda. Like, that's the
straight propaganda. Yes,
that's the biggest issue I had with this. This is a very propagandistic, which I'm going to pretend is a word without knowing if it is, movie. The whole thing just reeks of what Team America was always making fun of.
Right. Exactly. That's a great way to put it. So, okay. So final thoughts and rating on Top Gun.
I did not hate Top Gun. I will not be purchasing nor watching Top Gun again. I might watch the new one, although given the fact that the new one came out when it did, and after watching this one, I'm going to go into it very reluctantly and probably assume that we're going to get another propaganda piece on our hands. I won't go out of my way to watch it based off of this one, but again, it has some redeeming qualities, not enough of them. The most iconic scene in this movie, let me rephrase that. The most iconic scene in this movie doesn't involve an airplane, but a net and an inflatable ball. And I think that is a problem because the most iconic scene in this movie is truly cringeworthy. It's truly cringeworthy. And when you have a movie that has a most iconic scene, I don't think it should be that cringy. But at the same time, maybe it's iconic because it's so cringy. But overall, not terrible. In my opinion, not worth a second go through or a second watch through. Although I can see a demographic of the population that this would definitely appeal to. And they are not us, nor probably the people that are subscribed to our channel.
Yeah. So what's your rating on it?
I'll give it a 4 out of 10.
That's
I'll give it a 4 out of 10.
Way lower than I thought you were going to give it.
I'll give it a 4 out of 10.
Okay.
It's still pretty bad. I'm trying to I'm trying to approach this from a very unbiased perspective because I knew how biased I would be. And so I would say from an unbiased perspective, 4 out of 10.
Okay, well, for me, this is boring, slow, forced. The volleyball scene and the sex scene made me think, who in the hell is this movie for? Those scenes,
I think we know who this movie's for.
Those scenes in here are to get Chad's girlfriend into the theater with him to see this, I think. And it is such a blatant, this is for women too, sort of a thing, that it felt gross. The whole movie is cringe. It's cringe from top to bottom. The aerial cinematography, while amazing and probably, as you said, groundbreaking, is not enough to carry an entire movie, which is what I feel like this is.
It's Baywatch for Navy vets.
This would make a great 45-minute YouTube video of aerial cinematography. Outside of that, I don't think there's much here for me. I am not the target demo for this. Therefore, I could not wait for this to be over. But I felt that way 10 to 30 minutes into it. I couldn't wait for it to finish. And the only reason I ever watched it was because of this podcast, because you picked it. And I dislike that, and I dislike that immensely. So I will never watch Top Gun ever again. I have no want or need to see the sequel. Even if Miles, what's his name, Miles Teller or something, he's in it. The guy from Spiderhead.
Spiderhead, yeah.
Spiderhead. He's in it, and I do like him. The stuff I've seen him in, he's good in. I believe he plays Goose's son. I could be wrong about that. But either way, this whole thing was just cringy, and I hated it. And I will never watch Top Gun ever again. For me, and this is strictly my rating based on my opinion and how I feel about it. And so for me, this is a 2 out of 10. No one's going to agree with me on that. The cinematography is very good, although the color palette is absolute, and I mean literal. It looks brown and orange and gross. Everything is tan.
It looks like somebody spilled coffee on the negative.
Yes, and it's just gross. The cinematography can be amazing. There are some shots, especially when he's on his motorcycle of California, that's great. The aerial stuff's fantastic, but it's not enough to carry this movie, and therefore, I just didn't like any of it. I hated all parts of this. I dislike Tom Cruise in general as a person, as a human being. I dislike him. As an actor, I might like him less than as a human being. And so the only redeeming quality in this for me is Val Kilmer, and he's not in enough of it. So
no.
If you guys like this, make sure you hit the like button. If you really liked it, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And I think that is going to do it for today. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time from the deep. Bye-bye.
A Tom.